New Age is finally upon us, with all classes in the game receiving powerful new origin skills with their 6-job advancements that both perform a special bind and do massive damage. Boss monsters beware, as getting caught on the receiving end of these powerful new skills will lead to a very quick demise. Not only did the 6-job advancement provide these new origin skills, but Mastery cores have adjusted 4th job skills into enhanced versions of their previous forms as well. With these new powerful skills in our possession, we're going to take a look at Shadower's new origin skill, Half Cut, as well as how bursting and skill rotations have been adjusted to accommodate both this and the new Mastery core changes to Assassinate, known as Pulverize stacks. Hello everyone, my name is Chiseler, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to have a look at everything to do with how Shadower's bursts, both big and small, have been updated with the new 6-job advancements. In my previous Shadower bursting and skill rotation guide released after the Destiny patch, I discussed how Shadower is a very versatile class when it comes to damage output, and excels greatly when its cooldowns are managed properly. This has not changed since then, as Shadower is still a powerful DPM class, but now with access to a very potent Origin burst and powerful Assassinate boosts in the form of Pulverize stacks. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the new rotations a little further, starting with the most potent burst, the full burst with the Origin skill. As discussed in the last guide, the general rule of thumb for buffing for the full burst is to simply use skills in order from the longest to shortest durations. Shadower's new full burst is as follows. First, set down Dark Flare, as this skill is affected by sources of minion duration and technically makes it the longest duration skill. This skill helps with mob control in bosses like Varishilla and Darknell, and puts out approximately 1 Trick Blade's worth of damage over its 60-second duration. After this, we will use both Maple World Goddess's Blessing and Epic Adventurer, as both of these skills last for 60 seconds. Next is our first deviation from the Destiny guide. At this time, always place down Smokescreen next. With 6th job, Assassinate is boosted with a stacking mechanic known as Pulverize stacks. These stacks do more damage than normal Assassinates and are normally given one use of this every 10 seconds passively. Smokescreen has been given the added functionality of immediately providing 3 stacks of Pulverize uses, as well as cutting the next Pulverize cooldown from 10 seconds to 3 seconds. Due to this added effect of getting enhanced Assassinates continuously for 30 seconds, Smokescreen has been moved to always be used with a Shadower's full burst to take advantage of the other buffs as well. After using Smokescreen, immediately use Shadow Walker, as both Shadow Walker and Smokescreen last for 30 seconds. Shadow Walker is typically used after Smokescreen since the Smokescreen casting animation is very long, and the skill has a more potent effect than Smokescreen for overall damage. From here, use the Angelic Buster Link skill, Terms and Conditions, as well as Last Resort 2 in that order. For Last Resort, a new functionality was recently added where if you right-click the skill in your skill window, it will immediately skip Stage 1 Last Resort and go directly to Stage 2. This is very useful as it skips needing to go through the casting animation twice, and I strongly recommend all Shadowers to enable this feature. Last Resort is always used after Terms and Conditions, as the effects are more potent and we want them active for longer. This next step depends on the special rings in your possession. For those without special rings or a continuous ring, you can skip this step. Otherwise, a special ring is used here to wrap up your buffs before laying into the boss. For Ring of Restraint users, try to position yourself behind the boss so you can use Trick Blade and remain in the Ring of Restraint's area of effect. From here, you are done buffing up and ready to start using your damaging skills. Your first active skills are the A1 and /Shadow Formation combo touched on in the previous guide. Next up is what everyone's been waiting for, your Origin skill. Use your Origin skill next, as the A1 and /Shadow Formation will have activated Fatal Strike for those who use that special node, so we want to get as much of the Origin burst off during the Fatal Strike proc as possible. For those of you who are not aware, Fatal Strike is a special node that provides 100% damage for 2 seconds when a skill that inflicts damage is used. Most players in GMS will find that this effect can actually last as long as 6 to 7 seconds, depending on server delays. /Shadow Formation will be going off while the Origin skill animation is playing as well to really get the most out of the Fatal Strike proc. After the Origin skill ends, immediately use Sonic Blow and Trick Blade if you can stay within the Ring of Restraint effect. But hold up, the burst isn't over yet. When Sonic Blow and Trick Blade are done and weaving has resumed, pay attention to the Origin bind timer below the boss's HP bar. Once that timer reaches 90 seconds remaining, use your air to bind the boss for another 10 seconds to get additional time for getting some extra damage off. This step of using air to bind can be ignored when facing unbindable bosses, like Black Mage after P1 and Kuling and her perils. Once this bind wears off, liberated users have one last tool available to them, their Genesis iframe. For the last 10 seconds that Shadow Walker and Smokescreen are available for, you can use your iframe when the bind ends to get even more free damage out if you'd like. Some players who like to get off a safe partial burst may opt to save this for that stage instead. It depends on the nature of the boss fight. Shown on screen now is the full burst with Origin, performed at speeds you can expect during a boss fight. So that's the full burst with the Origin skill, but I wanted to touch on some extra notes for some things that can be changed up. Since we are relying on the Origin skill for the initial bind, it may be difficult to set yourself up behind very mobile bosses. If people want to forego the additional damage uptime given for using Air to Nova after the Origin bind ends, in favor of a significantly easier burst setup, then the Air to Nova bind can actually be used as the very first step of this process. You should be able to position yourself and use all other buffing skills and special rings within the 10 seconds of the bind before using your Origin skill. Be aware though, the Air to Nova skill does inflict damage and will proc Fatal Strike much earlier than your other damaging skills, meaning that the proc will be wasted as well. At the end of the day, I would recommend most players practice this rotation with saving the Air to Nova bind for after the Origin bind ends. However, this safer play is great for practice in the meantime. Next up is the full burst without the Origin skill. It is the same as the previously demonstrated rotation, however we use our Air to Nova bind after all buffs and special ring uses to try to get the most out of the Fatal Strike proc as well. Some players opt for using their Ring of Restraint after the boss is bound, which is a totally fine strategy to guarantee you can Trick Blade within the Ring of Restraint effect. Since Shadower is a 3-minute burst rotation class with sub 90 second skill cooldowns on most of our skills, we are able to get off another strong burst exactly between full bursts, called the partial burst. To pull this off, the skill order is as follows. First, place your Dark Flare if it is not down already. Next, use Terms and Conditions in last resort, as these are the longest duration skills in the partial burst. Afterwards, if you are ring swapping and have another special ring available, use it here. It can be seen that this entire time Darksight has not been used. That's where the new skill mechanics with New Age come into play. The next skill is Shadow Veil, which will be used to stay in Darksight. Using Shadow Veil will also proc Fatal Strike, so we want to get our damage off immediately afterwards. Up next, use A1 and / Shadow Formation. Thanks to the additional mechanic of entering Darksight with each Pulverize use, you will automatically be placed in Darksight for the next 6 seconds after using A1, or until another Pulverize is used. Shadow Veil gives you 2 stacks of Pulverize immediately after using it, meaning you get a Pulverize used to trigger Darksight at the start of your burst, and another to refresh the 6-second duration after your partial burst is over. Once A1 and / Shadow Formation have been used, immediately use Sonic Blow and Trick Blade. Once these skills are done, continue weaving to use the stored Pulverize stacks, which will keep you in Darksight until about the same time that Shadow Veil ends. Once Shadow Veil ends and the Darksight fades, your partial burst is considered complete. Shown on screen is the partial burst performed at speeds you can expect during a boss fight. Pay close attention to the Darksight durations and Pulverize stack counters throughout the burst. The final burst for Shadowers, the off burst, does not really exist anymore. Since we use Smokescreen for our full burst now, that means that we have to rely on Shadow Veil to keep us in Darksight for our partial burst, which leaves nothing to keep us in Darksight for what would be our off burst. For that reason, our off burst is now extremely simple. Just use Sonic Blow when it's off cooldown. That's it. However, that's not all that is to be said for Shadow Veil. Next up, we're going to go over the full 3-minute rotation of Shadower's skills. and how additional uses of Shadow Veil for more pulverized stacks and darkside uptime can be taken advantage of. Let's have a look at this new 3-minute rotation and how we can fit in additional uses of Shadow Veil without interfering with our other cooldowns. For the first 30 seconds, perform your full burst, with or without Origin, as demonstrated earlier in this video. For demonstration purposes, I've taken off my cooldown hat and Mercedes Legion block to show that this can be done with no cooldown reduction at all. Immediately when Shadow Walker and Smokescreen end at the 30-second mark, use your first Shadow Veil. A bit of extra damage can be put into the rotation if Shadow Veil is used here, as it should come off cooldown as soon as the partial burst is ready to be performed. At the 45-second mark, use Sonic Blow as it comes off cooldown. This will also sync its cooldown, ready to be used with the partial burst as well. At the 60-second mark, if available to you, look to ring swap between now and the partial burst, as Epic Adventure and Maple World Goddess's Blessing should be expiring at about this time. At the 90-second mark, perform your partial burst as demonstrated earlier in this video. You can ring swap back to your full burst special ring anytime after finishing this partial burst, as there are no lingering effects. At the 135-second mark, use Sonic Blow when it comes off cooldown. It should be ready for use with your next full burst. At the 150-second mark, use your last Shadow Veil. Your Shadow Veil should come off cooldown as your Shadow Walker and Smokescreen are ending from your next full burst. Upon hitting the 180-second mark, all of your skills should be off cooldown and ready to repeat the cycle. I've adjusted the line diagram and spreadsheet from the previous video to summarize the process, if you want something to study in image format. A picture of these is linked in the video description. That about covers everything I had in mind for this guide. Hopefully this video helps you adjust to the new bursting rotation introduced in New Age. In the previous video, I had a segment here where I talked about different ways to burst depending on the boss and the party composition. Thankfully, that no longer applies, as every situation should be bursting the exact same way now. As always, a like and subscribe is always appreciated, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and plentiful soul air to fragment drops. Until the next time, this has been Chiseler, goodbye and good night.